The candles on the table had been burning for almost 2 hours when Marcus stood up. Not dramatically. Not with a cleared throat or a tapped glass. He just pushed his chair back, picked up his phone, and said, "Before we do the toast, I need to share something with everyone here." The table went quiet, the way rooms only go quiet when people sense they're about to hear something they can't unhear. I'd known he was going to do it. He'd told me the night before, sitting on the edge of our bed, voice calm and steady the way it always was when he'd already made up his mind. I'd stared at the ceiling and thought about all the years I'd spent keeping this family's secrets like they were mine to keep. And then I'd said, "Okay, so I knew what was coming. I just didn't know if I was ready. My name is Claire. I'm 32 years old. I teach 4th grade at a public elementary school in Franklin, Tennessee, which means I spend my days convincing 9-year-olds that fractions aren't a personal attack. I'm good at patience. I'm good at keeping my voice level when things are unfair. I'm good at sitting with discomfort and not making it someone else's problem. My family taught me that, just not on purpose. I grew up the younger of 2 children in a household where the rules were simple and unspoken. My brother Nate was the center, and I was the orbit. Not neglected, exactly. My parents fed me, clothed me, showed up to my school plays with the slightly distracted expressions of people who'd done this before and found it less interesting the second time. They loved me the way you love a reliable appliance. Functional. Expected. Unnoticed until something went wrong. Nate is 3 years older than me and was treated from birth like the main character of a story the rest of us were lucky to appear in. Athletic, loud, easy to love, in the way that loud, confident people are easy to love by people who find quietness suspicious. He didn't do anything particularly remarkable growing up. He just did everything with enough swagger that our parents narrated it like a highlight reel. Nate got a C on a test, and my mother said he was creative. I got an A, and she said I studied too much. It wasn't cruelty. I don't think she even heard herself say it. That's the thing about favoritism in families. It's rarely loud. It's just a slow tilt in the floor that you adjust to until the day you realize you've been walking sideways your whole life. When Marcus and I got engaged last spring, we decided to do something small and meaningful for the announcement. A dinner. Not a party exactly. More like a gathering of the people who actually mattered. 14 people around a long table at a restaurant we loved in downtown Nashville. Private room in the back. Good wine. The kind of evening that's supposed to feel like the beginning of something real. We picked the date carefully. The last Saturday in September. Cool enough for the weather to be beautiful. Far enough out to give everyone time to plan. Close enough that it felt soon. I told my parents in early August, calling them separately the way I'd learned to do because they processed information better without each other's reactions in the room. My mother sounded genuinely warm. "That's wonderful, honey. We'll be there," my father said. September. Noted. Which from him was practically a sonnet. For a few weeks, everything felt the way it was supposed to. I sent a calendar invite. I made a reservation. Marcus and I picked out what we were going to wear and argued good-naturedly about whether a private dining room counted as formal enough to justify a tie. I let myself feel happy in that uncomplicated way that you know might not last. It didn't last. My mother called on a Tuesday night in late August. I was grading reading comprehension worksheets at the kitchen table, red pen in hand, half a glass of wine nearby. Her voice had that brightness in it that I'd learned over decades to distrust. The tone she used when she'd already decided something and was presenting it as a question. "So," she said, "I talked to Nate today." I set down my pen. "He's planning something really exciting. A big trip, a whole group of friends. He found this private villa rental in Mexico, all-inclusive kind of situation, and it happens to be the last weekend of September." I waited. "The same weekend as your dinner," she added, as if I hadn't already felt the floor shifting. "The same weekend as your dinner. Not your engagement celebration. Not the night you announced you're getting married. Your dinner." Like it was a meal I'd scheduled that could just be rescheduled. I said carefully, "Mom, we've had this date for 6 weeks. The reservation is made. People have already said they're coming." "I know," she said, "but Nate already put the deposit down. It's non-refundable. And you know how hard it is to get a full group together for something like that." Something in my chest went very still. How many people are going on this trip? His whole friend group. Maybe 12, 15 guys. And this is a vacation. Not a wedding, not a graduation. A vacation. She made a sound that wasn't quite a sigh and wasn't quite a laugh. Claire. He's excited. He's been going through a hard time lately and he really needs this. I thought about the reservation. I thought about the 14 people who'd already cleared their schedules. I thought about Marcus, who'd taken 2 weeks to find the right ring and another 2 weeks to find the right moment, and who deserved to stand up in front of the people who loved us and say, "We're doing this. I'm not moving the date," I said. The warmth left her voice the way warmth leaves a room when a window opens in winter. "I just think if you were a little more flexible." "I'm not moving the date, Mom." She said she'd talk to my father. He called the next morning before I'd even had coffee. My father doesn't do emotional conversations. He does directives. He told me that family meant compromise, that Nate had already committed, that I was being rigid. I said I'd planned this 6 weeks ahead of a last-minute trip my brother booked without checking anyone's calendar. He said I was making it about me. I almost said, "It is about me. It's my engagement." But I knew that logic didn't apply here. In my family, when Nate's needs and my needs collided, it wasn't a comparison. It was just a given. My father said, "If you won't move it, don't be surprised when we're not there." I said, "That's your choice to make." He said, "You've always been difficult." And then, because I'd been trained since childhood to absorb pain quietly and call it maturity, I said nothing. I just stood in my kitchen in the early morning light and felt the familiar cold of knowing I was loved. Just not enough. Marcus came in from a run while I was still standing there holding my phone. He's a forensic accountant, which means his entire professional life is built around finding the truth in paperwork. He's precise. He's patient. He doesn't get rattled by noise because he's spent years learning that the story is always in the details, never in the performance. He looked at my face and said, "What happened?" I told him. He listened with his eyebrows pulled together, the way they do when he's filing information. When I finished, he didn't yell, didn't call my father names, didn't tell me what I should have said. He just asked, quietly, "Where is Nate getting the money for a villa in Mexico with 15 people?" I shrugged. "He'll figure it out. He always does." Marcus went to pour himself a glass of water. Then he turned around. "Didn't your grandmother leave you something?" "For a house?" My stomach moved. When my grandmother passed 4 years ago, there had been an estate process I understood only loosely. Paperwork, lawyers, my parents handling the administrative side of things. My mother had told me, almost in passing, that my grandmother had set aside money for me specifically, earmarked for a first home purchase. "She wanted to give you a real start," my mother had said. "It's in a fund. Your father is managing it until you're ready to use it." I'd never seen statements. I'd never asked for them. In my family, asking your parents to account for money they were managing for you was an act of accusation, and I'd spent 32 years learning not to accuse. "I remember it," I said carefully. "Do you know how much it was?" I didn't. I'd been told it was a good amount. I'd let myself imagine something modest. 10, 15,000. Enough for a down payment boost someday. Marcus looked at me with an expression I'd come to recognize. It wasn't suspicion exactly. It was the look of someone who has learned that when a story doesn't make financial sense, there's usually a reason. "Do you have anything in writing?" he asked. I said, "Why are you asking me this?" He said, "Because your brother just booked a non-refundable private villa in Mexico, and the timing of this pressure campaign feels less like concern for Nate's schedule and more like concern for something else." That night, I found every document I'd ever received from my parents about my grandmother's estate. It wasn't much. A letter from years ago, with vague language about the fund's intent, a tax form I'd signed because my father slid it across a table and told me it was routine, one email from my mother saying the fund was doing well and that we'd talk about it when the time was right. The time, apparently, had never been right. Marcus spent the next 10 days doing what he does. He didn't tell me everything he was doing in real time. He asked me quiet questions, requested documents with legal language I barely followed, made calls in his home office with the door half closed. He told me only what he was certain of, which I understood later was his way of protecting me from the anxiety of uncertainty. One evening, he came to find me in the living room where I was reading. He sat down across from me, not next to me. He wanted to be able to see my face. "I found the account," he said. My book stayed open in my hands. "What do you mean?" "Your grandmother's fund. I found it in the estate records." He paused. "Claire?" "It was $47,000. I stared at him. "It was structured specifically for your benefit. First home purchase, or major life milestone. Not a general family fund. Yours." He turned his laptop toward me. The number sat there in a document, clean and official and impossible to misread. $47,000. My name in the beneficiary line. "Okay," I said. My voice sounded far away. "There was a transfer," he said. His voice was steady. The way you make your voice steady when you're handing someone something that's going to hurt. 14 months ago. From that account to an account connected to Nate. I closed my book. $43,000, Marcus said. The remaining $4,000 has been sitting there since. The number landed differently than I expected. Not with a crash. With a kind of dull, spreading recognition, like a bruise blooming slowly. I thought about every time my parents had told me the fund was fine. Every time I'd asked, vaguely, about whenever I'm ready to buy, and my mother had said plenty of time. "Don't worry." I thought about Nate's car 2 years ago. The one I'd assumed he financed himself. The apartment renovation he'd casually mentioned. The trip to Portugal with his girlfriend last summer. "Did they tell him it was mine?" I asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I found a text thread." He showed me the screenshot. "My mother to Nate, 14 months ago. We can move the money from Claire's fund. She's not using it, and she doesn't really need it the way you do right now. Just between us." 6 words sat at the bottom of that message and made my vision blur. Just between us. They'd planned to keep it secret. Not because they thought it was fine. Because they knew it wasn't. I sat with that for a long time. Marcus didn't rush me. He didn't fill the silence with reassurance. He just stayed in the room, which was exactly what I needed. 2 days before the engagement dinner, I called Nate. I didn't want to do it over text. I wanted to hear his voice when I asked. He answered on the 3rd ring, relaxed. The easy tone of someone who hasn't had to brace for consequences in a very long time. I said, "I need to ask you something directly." A beat. "Okay. Did you take money from my grandmother's fund?" Silence. Not the silence of someone who doesn't know the answer. The silence of someone calculating. "Where did you hear that?" he said finally. "I didn't hear it." "I have the transfer documentation," he exhaled. "Claire, that fund was a family resource. Mom and Dad decided it was in my name," I said. "For my first home? You're not buying a home right now. That's not the point. Look." His voice shifted into the tone I recognized from childhood, the one that meant he was about to explain to me why I was wrong about my own experience. "You have a good job. You have, Marcus. You're doing fine. I needed it. Things were tight and I had an opportunity and you're taking a 14-person trip to Mexico with it," I said. A pause. "That's a separate thing." "Is it?" He made a sound of frustration. "Why are you doing this? Why now? Right before my engagement dinner? Is that what you were going to say?" He went quiet. "Are you going to return it?" I asked. His voice went cold. "You're really going to blow up the family over this?" "I'm going to ask for what's mine. Mom and Dad made a decision about family finances. You don't get to overrule them." I almost said something about the word family finances and how it had somehow always meant what works for Nate. Instead, I said simply, "Come back from your trip, Nate. Then we'll talk," he said. "You're being dramatic," I said. "Have a safe flight." And I hung up. The morning of the engagement dinner, my mother called to tell me she and my father wouldn't be attending. Her voice was clipped and formal in the way that people get when they've convinced themselves that their cruelty is actually principle. She said they didn't feel comfortable sitting at a table with someone who was threatening the family. I noted that no one had threatened anything yet. She said I knew what I meant. She said she hoped I'd take some time to think about what I was doing to us. I said, "I'll see you when things are resolved." She said, You sound just like your father when you're being stubborn. I almost said that was interesting, given that she'd spent 32 years telling me I needed to be more like my father. Instead, I said goodbye, and I spent the next 4 hours getting ready for my engagement dinner. The restaurant was perfect. Long wooden table, warm light, the kind of place where the acoustics make conversation feel intimate, and the menu is short and confident. 14 people who loved us filed into the private room, hugging us, admiring my ring, asking questions about how he proposed with the delight of people who were genuinely happy for us. 2 chairs at the end of the table stayed empty. Nobody asked about them directly. A few people glanced. Marcus's mother squeezed my hand once and didn't say anything, which was exactly right. We ate. We laughed. Someone told an embarrassing story about Marcus in college that I will treasure forever. The wine was good, and the food was better. And for most of the evening, I let myself be present in the joy of it. Let myself feel the warmth of being surrounded by people who had shown up because they wanted to be there. Then, Marcus stood up. He didn't look angry. If anything, he looked the way he looks when he's presenting findings in a professional context. Clear-eyed, unhurried, certain. He picked up his phone, and the room slowly settled. "Before I do the toast I've been rehearsing," he said, and a few people laughed softly. "I need to share something with everyone at this table, because you're the people who matter most to us, and you deserve the truth." I looked at my hands in my lap. You might have noticed that Claire's parents aren't here tonight. The room acknowledged this quietly. They made the choice not to come. And I want to explain why. Because Claire has been carrying this alone for too long. He pulled up the document on his phone and connected it to the small screen mounted in the corner of the private room, the one the restaurant used for presentations. The number appeared in clean black text, $47,000. My name. The fund's purpose. Claire's grandmother passed away 4 years ago, Marcus said. She left Claire a specific inheritance, $47,000, designated for Claire's first home purchase. He let the number sit. 14 months ago, $43,000 of that was transferred to her brother's account. Without telling her, someone at the table made a soft sound. Her brother used a portion of it. He is currently on a vacation in Mexico that he booked for this exact weekend, causing Claire's parents to pressure her to cancel tonight, which is when Marcus would have told you all this. He paused. They chose to boycott the engagement of their daughter because she wouldn't accommodate a vacation funded by her own stolen money. He clicked to the text message. Just between us, I heard a chair shift. I heard someone near the far end of the table say, very quietly, "Oh my God." I kept my eyes on the tablecloth for a moment. My cheeks were hot, but I wasn't ashamed. I was just suddenly, exhaustingly visible in a way I'd spent my whole life avoiding. Marcus looked at me from across the table. "Claire," he said, and his voice was softer now. "Just for me, even though everyone heard it, you've been apologizing for taking up space your whole life. I am done watching you do that." That's when the tears came. Not the graceful kind, the sudden kind, the ones that arrive before you've decided to cry, the ones your body sends up like a signal flare because something has finally been said that is true. I pressed my fingers to the corner of my eye and laughed a little, because I couldn't help it. Because I had been holding this in like pressure behind a door for weeks, and now the door was open. Marcus's mother stood up from her chair, walked around the table, and hugged me. Just held on. And something in me that had been braced for a very long time let go. The dinner continued. It became something different than what I'd planned. Something more real, more honest, the kind of evening that you remember not because everything went smoothly, but because the people around the table showed you who they were. The next morning, while the memory of it was still fresh and sharp, our attorney sent the demand letter. Marcus had found one through a colleague who specialized in estate disputes. We hadn't announced it. We hadn't issued warnings. We'd just built the case quietly and filed it cleanly, the way Marcus does everything. My mother called twice before noon. Her first voicemail was stunned disbelief, the kind of message where you can hear someone recalibrating in real time. "I can't believe you would do this. After everything we've done for you. In front of everyone." Her second voicemail was tearful. "This is not what family does." I thought about all the things my family had done and did not return the call. My father texted, "Single sentence. You will regret this." I saved the text in the same folder where I kept the bank documentation. Nate called from Mexico. I could hear noise in the background, music, voices, the ambient sound of people having a good time on money that belonged to someone else. He was angry in the way that people get angry when they've been caught and are trying to make you responsible for catching them. He said I was vindictive. He said I was jealous. He said I'd always had a problem with him being successful. I waited for him to finish. Then I said, "When you're back, we can talk about the repayment structure the attorney laid out." "You got an attorney?" His voice went up. "Claire, this is insane." "It's documented," I said. "That makes it uncomplicated. Mom and Dad authorized that transfer. They weren't authorized to authorize it." A long pause. "I want the money back, Nate," I said. It was the first time in my life I had ever said something like that plainly, without softening it, without offering him a way to feel good about it. All of it. He said he needed time. I said the letter outlined the timeline. He said I was ruining everything. I said I hadn't started this. The restitution took 3 months. It came in pieces, which told me a lot about where the money had actually gone. And it came with the full suite of accompanying guilt theater. My mother's performances of wounded dignity, my father's cold silences, Nate's rotating arsenal of grievance. At various points I was told I was tearing apart our family, that I was ungrateful, that I had always been difficult, that my grandmother would be ashamed, that Marcus had poisoned me against them. I noticed that nobody, not once, said the money hadn't been mine. Marcus and I bought our house in April, a small craftsman bungalow about 20 minutes outside the city, with a big backyard and a kitchen that gets morning light, and a front porch where I can grade papers and watch the neighborhood go about its life. The closing documents had my name on them and money in them that my grandmother had saved for exactly this moment, and I sat in the car in the driveway afterward and cried for about 4 minutes before Marcus handed me a coffee and said, "Ready to go inside?" I was. I think about my parents sometimes. Not with the desperate longing I used to feel, the one that lives in children who believe that if they behave perfectly enough, they'll finally be loved the way they need to be. More with a kind of clarity. The way you understand something differently once you've seen it in writing rather than just felt it in the dark. They loved me. I genuinely believe that. They also chose, consistently, and without much examination, to prioritize my brother's comfort over my well-being. They stole from me and called it family. They boycotted my engagement dinner and called it principle. They made me feel guilty for having a legal right to my own inheritance and called it drama. I stopped calling to smooth things over. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped translating my pain into formats comfortable enough for them to accept. If they wanted a relationship with me, they knew where I was. I wasn't hiding. A few weeks after we moved in, I ran into an old family friend at the grocery store. She'd been at the dinner. She hesitated when she saw me, like she wasn't sure of the protocol. And then she said, "I've known your parents for 15 years. I never knew." I nodded. She said, "That night, when Marcus showed everyone." I kept thinking, how long did she carry all of that? I thought about the answer longer than she probably expected. "I thought it was normal," I said finally. "I thought everybody felt this way in their family, like they were the one that didn't quite fit, like they just needed to try harder and eventually it would balance out." She looked at me with something like sadness. "It shouldn't have been on you to balance it. I know that now. I've always known it somewhere underneath, in the place where you put things you're not ready to look at. But knowing it underneath and knowing it in your bones are two different things, and it takes different kinds of events to get you from one to the other. My family taught me to be quiet, to fold myself into small shapes, to understand that keeping the peace was more important than keeping myself. They meant to teach me humility, I think. They meant to raise a daughter who didn't ask for too much. What they actually did, without intending to, was marry me off to a man who keeps documents. Marcus still jokes about it. He'll say, in that dry, affectionate way of his, "Good thing you married a forensic accountant," and I'll roll my eyes and lean into him and think about how strange and specific luck can be. How sometimes the thing that saves you is as simple as someone who learned early that the truth is always in the details, and who loved you enough to go looking. The house is good. The kitchen gets light until almost noon. My grandmother's ring, the one my mother had told me was being kept safe and that somehow appeared in a box in my parents' garage once the legal process began, sits in a small dish on my dresser where I can see it every morning. I teach 4th grade. I am still good at patience. I am still good at keeping my voice level when things feel unfair, but I am not good at keeping quiet anymore. And I think, wherever she is, my grandmother would say that was exactly right.